A while back, I was late for an appointment. I hate being late for an appointment. I like being on time all the time. And I was late for an appointment, and I live in Southern California, down in Orange County, and I was on my way to go speak somewhere. And as I'm driving, I'm realizing, man, I am going to be late. So I gave it some gas. And I was doing a nice, good Christian 95. And I was going down the highway, and have you ever been going down the highway, ran through a yellow light, and pray at the same time, God, don't help me get caught? Isn't that a weird prayer? Lord, as I break the law, may you be with me. And I'm driving down the freeway, and all of a sudden, I look up, and I see the red and the blue lights. And I'm like, oh my goodness, now I'm going to be more late, and it's going to cost me a fortune. So I'm driving down the freeway, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And so see the red and blue lights. So what do? I punch it. And you might have saw it on the news, a little helicopter chasing me. And anyway, so I pull over to the side of the road, and and he gets out of the car, and I see him coming. And this is so bad. I know you're all going to judge me right now, but let's not try to judge me. I look down, and on the right side, right here in my seat right over here, is my Bible. Now, totally being honest with you, and don't you love it when a pastor says that? I love when a pastor says, can I be honest with you? Because I'm always thinking, what have you been doing up to this point? But anyway, I grab this Bible, and this is bad. This is horrible. As he's walking up, I put it on my dashboard. Because I'm thinking, maybe he's one of us. So, it had to look like social media, so to put a cup of tea and a candle just to make it look right. And he comes pulling up, and he goes, license and registration, please. So I give him a license and registration. He's looking, he's talking to me. The whole time, folks, he's looking at me, he's looking at my Bible. Then he's looking at my Bible, he's looking at me, and he's looking at my Bible, and I'm like, I got him. This is it. He's going to let me go. He says, I'll be back in a second. He goes back, he goes into his car, whatever. He's writing me a ticket. And I'm thinking, what is he doing? I thought we had something. Come on, Comes back up, hands me my license registration to sign here, all this stuff. And I'm like, unbelievable. The Bible's sitting right there. And he's walking out. He goes, okay, drive safely. And he leans back, and he says to me as he points at the Bible, hey, read Romans 13:1. Now, I know the Bible, but I don't have every verse memorized like Pastor Jim. So he takes off, I open up the Bible, obey the laws of the land. You laugh, I'm out $375. You know what he was really telling me? He says, hey buddy, you might want to obey all the Bible and not just part of it. What he really was saying was selective obedience is not obedience at all, it's just convenience. Have you ever noticed, though, is as we look at the Bible, I think that we like some parts of it and maybe not other parts because of what it does. But let me go even farther than that. I think sometimes we look at the goodness of God in the Bible, we look at the wonderful things of God, we look at the blessing and favor of God, and have you ever noticed this? It's a lot easier to believe it for someone else than it is to believe for yourself. I don't know why that is. But if you go back in the Bible, it's always been that way. There's always this struggle for us to see that God may have something more for our life and for our family than we currently have because we kind of settle. Let me take you back 3,000 years ago to 11th century BC. We come to the story, a very famous story of David and Goliath. Even if you're new to church, you've probably heard of the story. David defeats Goliath. That's not a spoiler alert. Everybody knows that. But let's dive into the story for a bit. But let me give you a little background. So on one side, stay with me. On one side, you've got the Philistines. Say Philistine. Okay, the Philistines, they're the bad guys. Okay, on the other side, you've got the army of Israel. Okay, and they're the good guys. The Philistines have got this giant named Goliath who's 9 feet, 6 inches tall and has a spear with an iron head on it that's 15 pounds. And he would come out and he would mock God, and he would taunt them and say that they're weak and they're no good and how strong he was. They were afraid and they were scared. Up in the mountain is this kid named David. I say kid. They say he was theologians think he was between 17 and 19 years old for lots of reasons. Now so he's a teenager, 17 and 19 years old. He's up tending to the sheep. His brothers are down in the battlefield area because no one thought he was strong enough to actually do anything, so they left him up with the sheep. And his brothers are down there, and Goliath is on the other side. And one day his dad comes to him, David, 17 or 19 years old, so we'll just call him 18. We'll put it right there in the middle. Let's call him 17. That even sounds younger. He's 17 years old, we'll say, okay? And his dad comes to him and says, hey, David, your brothers are fighting in that battle over there. I want you to take this basket with cheese and bread in it and deliver it to your brothers. Now, when your dad doesn't think you're big enough to fight, and then he gives you cheese and bread and a little basket and says, you deliver it, Little Red Riding Hood. Can you imagine how you feel? He comes down to the battle. He sees everybody scared. They're whining. They're accepting, this is it. We're defeated. Goliath is too big. And this is where we pick up the story. As soon as, verse 24, as soon as the Israelites' army saw him, they began to run away in fright. Have you seen the giant, the men asked. He comes out each day to defy Israel. The king has offered a huge reward to anyone who kills him. David asked the soldiers standing nearby, what will a man get for killing the Philistine and ending his defiance of Israel? Oh, I love this part. Who is this pagan Philistine anyway, that he is allowed to defy the army of the living God? Here's big idea number one that I want you to write down. Ready? Here it is. If you're taking notes, what others choose to accept, David chose to reject. See, everybody else was going like, David, he's too big. He's a giant. There's nothing that we can do. And you know what they were really doing? If you look throughout it, we don't have time. They were signing up for slavery because if they lost, they would become slaves. And he says, they're just like, we'll just be slaves. Our life will never get better. And David's going, I reject that. I reject that you think this is the best your life's going to get. I reject that you think you have to be a slave to Goliath. He rejected it. And he said, this is not the way that it's going to be. How often do we do that? How often do we accept less than God's best for our life? Hey, this is the best my marriage will get. Why? This is the best my children will get. Why? This is the best my finances will get. Why? Why is it that we choose to accept that? And we're all guilty of it. But David rose up and said, no. I'm going to reject what you guys are thinking because I'm not going to accept that in my life. I'm not going to accept this is the best it's going to be. I do a lot of flying. I'm a founding pastor at South Hills Church, as Pastor Jim mentioned. We have Church Boom, and we do this thing called Church Rescue where we rescue churches. We're going to do that today. It's going to be a privilege and honor to do that. But I fly a lot. Did 161 flights last year. 161. And I hate flying still. To this day, I hate flying, even though I fly about 150 times a year. I hate flying. You ever thought about that? Before you get on the plane, the last word you see is the word terminal. Who came up with that idea? What a dumb word. Get on the plane, it's terminal. I mean, who's thinking that's a good idea? I remember I was about to get on this plane, and then they delayed it. And then we find out it's going to be delayed for 2.5, 3 hours, some mechanical problem. I'm sitting there. This is probably 8, 9 years ago. I fly all the time. And this guy comes over to me, long story short, he comes over to me. He's like, hey, man. He goes, hey, you doing, Mo? And I go, oh, dude, I know you. We haven't seen each other in years. Give him a big hug. He goes, man, my flight got delayed too. And I'm like, dude, we haven't seen each other. Sit down. Let's catch up. And he goes, no, man, let's go into the Admiral Lounge. Now, the Admiral Lounge is this fancy place where you get to go into, those that fly a lot. It's kind of really nice. Got a little restaurant, a little massage place. It's really awesome. It's like away from everybody over here. And over here is this Admiral Lounge. And I looked at him. This is 8, 9 years ago. And I said, Admiral Lounge? I go, we can't go in the Admiral Lounge. He goes, why is that? I go, we're not pilots. And he looked at me and goes, what are you talking about? It's for people that fly a lot. And because Admiral, doesn't that sound pilot-y? I don't know if that's a word, but it is today. He's like, come on. He goes, come on, man. He goes, we can go in there. I had no idea that people were allowed to go in there and that it was all wonderful and it was amazing. And I had no idea. So he goes, let's go. And the doors open up. I'm not even kidding. We walk up the slider doors. And all of a sudden, everything's all peaceful. Over here is McDonald's. And all these kids with snotty nose are throwing french fries at each other. But then this opens up. And I walk in, it's like, ha! And I could hear the angels. He checks in, does his little stuff, and she takes my name down, and she looks at me. Now, keep in mind, they got a restaurant in there. It's peaceful. It's all nice. She looks at me, takes my name, and she goes, oh, Mr. Sonksen. I said, yeah. And she goes, you've been a member for 7 years. I never went in there. I was out here with the commoner when I could have went to the top of the Titanic and went in there, this glorious place. For 7 years, I had access to something better. I had the privilege and the membership to walk through the doors of something better in my life, but I just didn't know it. And that's the same thing with you and I. There's so much more God has for our life, and we just don't walk through the door. Now, let's pick up the story where we left off. David rejects it. Remember, he's like, what are you guys thinking? Your life can be better. This can be better. You reject this notion that we're defeated. Then Saul, the king, overhears it. And Saul, the king, overhears this conversation, and he's like, you come speak to me. So this 17-year-old kid now is speaking to the king, Saul. And this is where we pick up the story. Look what it says. Don't worry, verse 32. Don't worry about this Philistine, David told Saul. I'll go fight him. Think about this for a moment. You are the king of Israel, and you have a 17-year-old kid saying, don't worry. All your warriors are scared, and so are you, but I'll go fight them. 17 years old, you're like, you little punk. And don't be ridiculous, Saul replied. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since youth. But David persisted. I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats. He said, when a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club, and I rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I have done this to both the lion and the bear, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine. For he has defied the army of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from the Philistine. Now, here's big idea number 2 I want you to write down. David knew that the battle belonged to the Lord, but the fight belonged to him. There was a difference. Look at what David says. David goes, I'm the one that beat up the bear. I'm the one that ripped apart the jaw of the lion. I'm the one that fought them. But the Lord rescued me. David understood. The battle belonged to the Lord. There's no doubt. The battle belongs to the Lord. But the fight belongs to you and I. That's the difference. David understood the difference. That there was the fight and then there was the battle. You see, the battle belongs to the Lord with whatever you and I are facing right now. It is God. He is in charge. He gets the victory. But you know what? Sometimes you just got to fight. Sometimes you got to go, you know what? I need counseling. I know God's going to do it, but I need some help. I got to get some wisdom on my finances because I'm a mess. I got to get wisdom on how to fix my marriage and make it better so we could be roommates or soulmates, not just roommates. I got to fix some things with my kids. I got to get some help. Yeah, the battle belongs to the Lord, but the fight belongs to me and to you. You got to fight. Fight the good fight. We got to go after it. I remember I went in a triathlon a few years back. I don't even know what it was, like a 1 mile swimming, 20 miles biking, 10 miles, 5 miles running, whatever it was. It was a disaster. I came in last place. Matter of fact, I just crossed the finish line about an hour ago. And took 6 years, but I'm here. So good to be with you. I remember when we went out into the water, I'll never forget, our time was about to go, and we're at Oceanside, and the waves are big, and they're setting out really far, which means when they collapse, it's like 30 feet down. You don't hit the sand and come back up. I'm scared to death. I'm thinking this is going to be a disaster. I look at the guy next to me. He's like, hey, man. He goes, you ever done this before? And I go, no, I've never done it. Have you? And the guy goes, oh, yeah. He goes, I do this all the time. And then he looks at me, he goes, but I've never seen waves like that. And I'm like, well, this ain't good. So we go out there swimming, a couple hundred of us. I saw him get rescued. A jet ski came and got him. He got rescued because he was drowning. And I remember going out a mile, and then you have to come in or something like that. And this wave is coming over me. And the whole time, I'm literally praying because I don't see any of the lifeguards. And I'm thinking, God, I am way out here. And I literally, honestly was scared. And I was like, God, help me, please. But here's the thing. I kept praying, God, help me, be with me. I literally was praying because I was a little bit scared. But you know what I didn't do? I never stopped paddling. I never stopped saying, well, God, just take care of it, and you'll just somehow lift me out of this water and put me on the shore. No, because the battle belonged to the Lord, but the fight belongs to me. I have to do my part in it. Let me give you two truths I want you to write down. They won't come up on the screen. Just write these down. Here it is. Goliath, this is so good. Ready? Goliath wasn't David's greatest battle. He was David's greatest blessing. Why? Because if David, which he did, fights Goliath, which he did, and take him out, which he did, you got to understand something. Goliath becomes David's greatest blessing because he gets a reward. He gets more money than he could ever imagine. He got the daughter of Saul. His dad never had to pay taxes again. He became a hero. He became the man that rescued. He's the one that was a legend. It paved the way for him becoming king. Why? Because we look at it and we think, oh man, David's greatest battle was Goliath. No, it was his greatest blessing. Whatever Goliath that's standing in front of you, understand something. There's a reward standing behind him. If you'll fight Goliath, you'll see the reward that will come because it came for David. And the second little thing I want you to write down is this. We always teach, and don't we do this in Sunday school? If those of you go way back to Sunday school, we always teach that God sent David to kill Goliath. We teach that God sent David to kill Goliath, but maybe God sent Goliath to reveal David. It revealed him. It revealed the kind of faith he had, the kind of strength he had, the kind of courage he had, the kind of tenacity he had. It revealed who he was. That's what Goliath did. And that's what your personal Goliath and your personal thing will do. It will reveal who you really are. Whether or not you quit or you stand up and fight will be revealed, not in the blessing, but in the battle. It is always in the battle when we are revealed. It's always in the battle. All right, let's go back to the story. Here we go. Saul gives David permission. Saul says, all right, you little punk. I don't know if that's what it says, but in my Bible it says that. He says, all right, man, if you want to fight him, go fight him, David. So he gives David a bunch of armor. David says, hey, this armor doesn't fit me. This is not good armor for me. It doesn't fit me. He takes it all off. And he holds on to a sling. It's not a slingshot, but we'll call it one for that, for lack of explaining or taking time. But basically a sling that he would kind of sling these rocks at. And the Bible says that he went over to a stream and he picked up 5 stones and put them in his bag. That's an important part. We'll get back to that in a minute. He picks up 5 stones, puts them in his bag, okay? And now he's ready to go fight with a sling and 5 stones against Goliath, who's got a shield and a sword and everything else. And he's got a slingshot, basically, and he's got 5 stones that he got from the stream. Now, that's where we pick the story up. David goes down to the battlefield. It's David, 17 years old, standing there with a slingshot. Can you see it in your mind's eye? And 5 stones. And big old Goliath is standing there, and he's taunting him, making fun of him, and he's mocking David's God. He's mocking our God. And look what he says. And David, as we look at it, it says, David replied to the Philistine, you come to me with the sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the army of Israel, whom you've defied. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut your head off. And then I will give you the dead bodies of your men to the birds and wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God of Israel, and everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with the sword and the spear. This is the Lord's battle. Oh, he says it again. It's the Lord's battle, but I'm going to do the fighting. And he will give it to us. As Goliath moved closer to attack, David quickly ran out to meet him, reaching into his shepherd's bag. Remember that bag? Taking out the stone, one of the 5 stones, he hurled it with a sling and hit the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank, and Goliath stumbled and fell down to the ground, and we know that he died. Now, here's the third thing I want you to write down as we circle the plane on this here. When others stood on the sidelines, David stood on the front line. You see, here's the thing. The brothers that David had that were fighting the battle and were scared and were ready to give up and just become slaves, they could have been the hero. They could have been the hero. They could have got the reward, but they stood on the sideline. The rest of the army of Israel, they could have gotten the reward. They could have been the hero, but they stood on the sideline. Saul, who was actually the largest guy in the army, according to Scripture, the king, he was scared to death of Goliath too. He could have been the hero. He could have been the one that come to the rescue, but he stood on the sideline. When everyone was on the sideline, David stood on the front line, and he fought. You see, here's the thing, and I want you to get this. You might want to write this down. We often focus on the bag, and we overlook the basket. Remember, what is the bag? The bag holds the 5 stones, remember? And he picks them up, he throws them in his bag, and that's what we focus on. He hurled it, he did it, he killed Goliath. That's what we focus on. But the basket, that was the one with the bread and cheese, remember? Okay, here's the thing. David, we focus on the bag, the warrior part. David was coming with the basket to serve. Here's the thing. David didn't come down from the mountain where he was shepherding the sheep to come down to fight on the battlefield. David came down to serve. That was the only reason he was there to begin with. He was there to serve. Think about that for a moment. The power of the bag happens because of the power of the basket. Okay, think about this for a moment. Stay with me. It was the basket, not the bag. It was the basket that brought him to the king, which brought him to Goliath, which brought him to the battlefield, which brought him to his reward, which brought him to his bride, which brought him to the wealth. It was the basket that got all of that. It didn't start with the fight. It started with serving. That's what did it for him. It changed everything for him. The battle right there, we look at it, it's not the bag. It all started with the basket. It all started with a heart to serve. Everything David had from that point forward was the result of the basket. He could have looked at his dad when his dad said, hey, take the cheese and the bread and go deliver it. You know what he could have did? Hey, Dad, I'm already anointed to be king. They've already said that I'm the king. And so, Dad, you're going to have to bow to me someday, so you deliver the basket. But David didn't do that. David took the basket, brought it to his brothers, and it was that basket that brought him to the king and brought him to his reward and brought him to Goliath and brought him to a place where 3,000 years later, we're still talking about him today. It was the basket that did all of that. The breakthrough for your life, I believe that God wants to do something amazing in your life. I believe that we need to reject the idea that this is the best our marriage will get, that this is the best our relationships will get, this is the best our family's going to get, this is the best our finances are going to get, this is the best my spiritual. I think we need to just reject all of that. And I think we need to jump in that battlefield and say, God, the battle belongs to you, but the fight is right here. I'm not settling anymore. Not settling anymore. But again, it starts with the basket.